Andy Warhol?
I have them somewhere. I will find. I'm just going through all this stuff.
Please find them. That would be so
I
epic.
know. You are exactly what you would have loved.
Did you know him?
No, I never met Andy Warhol.
I used to. I thought he was one of the stupidest people I'd ever met in my life.
You are exactly what he would have loved. Exactly
what he would have loved.
$16 million, $17 million.
Revolutionary art today is an oxymoron. Art today is an industry absorbed by a ghoulish masquerade of celebrity, publicity, and billionaire hedge fund managers. Artworks are commodities. Their sale is largely unregulated, and their value is resilient even in the face of economic downturn. It wasn't always like this. Avant-garde art was once seen as a revolutionary activity, socially effective, public, disruptive. Here and there, it still vibes, but as capitalism evolves, so too does the revolutionary imagination. If art isn't up to the task anymore, perhaps we can invest our creative energies elsewhere. Shout out from quarantine. I don't have any access to hardware here, and I don't know when I will again, so here is plastic pills with no visage. I collabed on this script with Mike Watson, Adorno scholar and author of this book. We're going to run through a short history of revolutionary anti-capitalist art, and maybe inspire you to go with the Cathedral Machine by memeing? This book addresses the online left, particularly in its attempts to counter the online right via memes and videos and other content. According to Watson, we should seize upon the wayward and unpredictable tendencies of the internet, which may serve a similar purpose as that to which avant-garde art aspired. This relationship is not without precedent. Picasso said, "My membership of the Communist Party is the logical consequence of my whole life, of my whole work. For I am proud to say, I have never considered painting as an art of simple amusement, of recreation. I have wished, by drawing and by color, since those are my weapons, to reach ever further into an understanding of the world and of men, in order that this understanding might bring us each day an increase in liberation." So, without further ado, here's some history. It's 1917, and war is raging across continental Europe, as ruling elites send the poor to eat machine gun bullets. But here, in an alleyway in Zurich, the capital of neutral Switzerland, two combustible components rub up against each other, yet fail to ignite. These components are the leftist revolutionary vanguard, figured by Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, and the artistic avant-garde in the form of the Dadaist Cabaret Voltaire down the street. While Lenin was writing Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, the Dadaists were doing this. We can see here an analogy of the entwined but separate trajectories of experimental modern art and the revolutionary left, two avant-gardes of dreams that will never become concrete, and concrete realities that fail to live up to dreams. Revolutionary art and revolutionary politics tend to rub shoulders throughout the 20th century, but while both seek to disrupt the status quo, their attempts often fail. This frustration is both a theme of this video and this book, which argues that we might overcome it by deploying expressivity to disrupt the political and aesthetic sphere. Could the creative energies that find expression today on the internet through memes, YouTube videos, and Twitch be used to out-weird the increasingly bizarre state of capitalism? I mean, the fact is, the left tends to lose publicly. We've already lost at art, at politics, and in the mainstream media. But what we can do, what we might envision, is develop what Deleuze calls a minor literature, a subversive lexicon vocabulary of our own. And maybe it's already becoming, in memes, of all things. A minor literature is not the literature of a minor language, but the literature a minority makes in or within a major language. Now hold up, you might say. I've done my Marxist math, and the proletariat is not a minority. That's where their power is supposed to come from. And while that's true by the numbers, class consciousness is very much minor relative to the major languages today. That of mainstream politics, media, and sadly, art. It wasn't always so. The history of avant-garde art is full of examples of artists who challenged institutional art, which is virtually always entwined with wealthy cultural elites. Sadly, though, the messages of their work gets absorbed by their celebrity. Picasso's Critique of Warfare, Guernica, ended up adorning the United Nations, the embodiment of the Cathedral Machine. The rest of the art world looks like this.
It's going to galleries, meeting other collectors, seeing museum exhibits, and buying things.
Commodity, celebrity, and a preposterous amount of money on the increase. The world thereby loses its depth and threatens to become a glossy skin, a stereoscopic illusion, a rush of filmic images without density. But is this now a terrifying or an exhilarating experience? Frederick Jameson asks. Here's Diego Rivera, a Mexican communist mentored by Picasso. He saw himself as a radical, hung out with Leninists in Paris, and painted murals. Now here's the thing about murals. They're formally democratic. They break out of the gallery. They're public. They can't be sold to private collectors. Rivera's content, too, was anti-imperialist and pro-labor. It responded to human misery and exploitation. As a result, he was enthusiastic about the promises of Marxism and Leninism. He signed the October Group's manifesto, which stated that the task of art is to raise the ideological, cultural, and domestic levels of the backward strata of the working class and of those workers who are undergoing an alien, that is, bourgeois, class influence. These days, you need to have a few $1 million lying around to own this radically anti-capitalist art. Now, street art, co-option of politically charged art, rebellion against the status quo, celebrity? Bet you know where this is going. Banksy is a street artist, a rebel in a punk rock Gen X sort of way. As with Rivera's murals, street art is formally democratic. It's out there to be viewed for free, apart from the cloistered gallery spaces and from the private collections of the rich, right? Nope. He paints on a wall, they cut out the wall, and sell it. Banksy does his best to subvert, and precisely by that subversion makes six-figure numbers at Christie's auctions. His works, such as the print, "I can't believe you morons actually buy this shit," are, on their face, critical of the privatized art world, yet fundamentally supports an elite club entwined with venture capital and major investment sectors. It's sold as an edition of 30 prints for over £1 million in 2019. Banksy's trajectory of successfully commercializing anti-commercial form and content, from graffiti artist to the darling of the art investment sector, tells an undisputed forerunner of celebrity street artist, Jean-Michel Basquiat. As a teenager in the 70s, Basquiat tagged New York streets with anti-capitalist messages, as one half of the graffiti duo Samo, meaning same old shit. Basquiat's charisma and precocious talent endeared him to some notable New York personae, not least Andy Warhol, who mentored Basquiat's rise to international art stardom, producing scrawled graffiti paintings to be shown and sold in galleries. Commercial success, fame, and overwork led to his burnout and unfortunate death. He overdosed in his Manhattan art studio, which figures as both suicide and resignation from an untenable dual life, the superstar artist. That is, on one hand, decrying the system, its depthlessness and pomp, while at the same time being celebrated by that system. As so often happens, the young idealist was rinsed dry, his works becoming mere commodities in the market he had railed against. After a certain level of success in the art world, this co-option of an artist's values almost seems inevitable. The artist Oscar Murillo, who similarly enjoyed a meteoric rise and drew early comparisons to Basquiat for his scrawled style and because of how he looked. Though collectors looking to pick up such works at Murillo's first New York show left bemused when faced with a performative installation comprising a factory line and 13 Colombian workers producing chocolate candies. The collaboration with Colombian chocolate manufacturer Colombina referenced Murillo's personal history, as his mother worked at a candy processing plant in Colombia prior to emigrating to the UK. The show aimed to bring awareness to the working conditions of exploited factory workers, while at the same time presenting difficult issues of exploitation and globalization to the privileged and largely white art viewing public. As politically charged as it was, the work was, as per usual, made for sale to wealthy collectors. The mechanisms of global capital keep on grinding, while perversely allowing the wealthy to participate in the personal narrative of a politically critical artist. Aesthetic production today has become integrated into commodity production generally. The frantic economic urgency of producing fresh waves of ever more novel-seeming goods, from clothing to airplanes, at ever greater rates of turnover, now assigns an increasingly essential structural function and position to aesthetic innovation and experimentation. Such economic necessities then find recognition in the varied kinds of institutional support available for the newer art. Again, Frederick Jameson. So it would seem that art has become so co-opted by this financier mechanism that it can no longer generate vectors of resistance, of deterritorialization, to recall Deleuze once more. However, the basic message of media critique, namely that mass media is nothing but the inane repetition served up for masses by elites, doesn't hold entirely true today because of the internet. Adorno and Horkheimer wrote in The Dialectic of Enlightenment, the culture industry is not the art of the consumer, but rather the projection of the will of those in control onto their victims. The automatic self-reproduction of the status quo in its established forms is itself an expression of domination. However, today we have more choice than ever before. Hell, we don't even choose the media, we make the media. As such, there must be some cause for positivity, however tentative, against the overwhelming tendency towards, black-pilled nihilism. So what is the relevance of this to us? I'll call us, this channel, Watson, maybe you, those who believe in a collective liberatory politics, that is, in a brief and overly simplistic label, the left. Activists, theorists, irony warriors, and even posters. We can, and I hope this is not too presumptuous, insert our present skirmishes into this narrative of avant-garde history that I've laid out. After all, a central dream of the avant-garde is the dream of a public art, and content creation and meme culture might be the closest thing we have to that right now. It's about creating a new imaginary. Memes and left content function as something unco-optable in terms of content for now, though it's not like they don't try. Content like this isn't associated with genius or celebrity, neither can they be used as advertising in themselves. The majority of anti-capitalist messaging online cannot be directly sold to anyone, and while systems of monetization do exist on YouTube and Twitch, the possibility that an image producer's anti-capitalist messages might be co-opted simply does not exist in the same way as it does in the art world. At least for now, they can't co-opt it for anything other than its intended end. Though data corps do make money off our clicks, still a range of left voices are being heard as a chorus. It's becoming a language with effects AFK. Indeed, the sum of memery may well have contributed in these years to a shift to extremes in the political views of younger voters, both left and right. That can't be said for a Basquiat, Banksy, or Murillo artwork. If you don't want to go so far as to call these memes or YouTube videos art, then fine. I probably wouldn't either. But we could call memery a cultural act in defiance of the mainstream propaganda machine. In defiance of it, we can always be looking for new forms of mimesis. Now here's a bit of aesthetic theory. I think it's Auerbach wrote a book on this. Mimesis is about art accurately imitating life. So when life becomes surreal, art must become surreal to imitate it. And when the status quo, as today, becomes absurd, the same goes for art. Memes may be a new form of mimesis, a truer representation of our reality than the rest of the image complex. Though I wouldn't say this is difficult, if you take the mass of media images, from advertising to political theater to the other spectacles I've covered on this channel, there's not much reality left in screens. Here's a long quote, but Jameson predicts, in the early 90s, a new left art, and memes may fit this bill. New art forms seek to endow the individual subject with some new heightened sense of place in the new global system. That is, consciousness, broadly defined. For Jameson, the new political art, if it is possible at all, will have to hold to the truth of postmodernism. That is to say, to its object, the world space of multinational capital, at the same time which it achieves a breakthrough to some, as yet, unimaginable new mode of representing it, in which we may again begin to grasp our positioning as individual and collective subjects and regain a capacity to act and struggle which is at present neutralized by our social confusion. That's the purpose of this channel. The expressive form of postmodernism, if any there be, will have as its vocation the invention of a new imaginary of subversive politics, that is, the writing of a minor literature. Look, we have a goal, whether or not it translates to political offices. That goal is to create defiance in a lexicon of symbols, art, memes, and of course, YouTube videos. It's political experimentation, a task for new types of thinking. We have the means, more than ever before, to combine the potential of aesthetic and political disruption. The internet provides fertile ground for the continued attempt to unite aesthetics with the political ambitions of the left. Still, it's worth reminding ourselves that we're in for an endless struggle. Adorno and Horkheimer may have been referring to media forms that are more basic in structure than our own, yet the basic argument still holds. The media monopoly is run in the interest of profit, not life. Posting Stalin memes and guillotines won't end in the overthrow of capitalism. But that doesn't mean they don't have an expressive function. I feel like I'm being overly didactic here, but I'm almost through. In his last unfinished work, Aesthetic Theory, Adorno wrote that the darkening of the world makes the irrationality of art rational. Radically darkened art. The absurdity of the capitalist system itself is that the systems we develop to free us from irrational belief then turn us into objects of irrational belief. This absurdity, perhaps, is best countered by an equally absurd art form. Maybe we see a form of this in the mass of dank Bolshevik memes, shitposting, vaporwave, and acid communist memery. I don't know what any of these things mean, and they don't make much sense to me. But fundamentally, does the status quo make any more sense? Today, we have the means like never before to create media outside of the cathedral, outside the gallery, the image complex, and create a minoritarian lexicography.
Isn't it a miracle what so much money and so little ability can produce? Just extraordinary.